Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing, and I have a really incredible dear friend of mine who is back in the podcast sphere and back in the temple for the first time. I want to welcome back, my dear friend Jim. And from anyone who's watched the channel, listened to the material, followed the guests, he has an incredible NDE experience that catapulted him into a realization of so many different things. So we're going to go from past the extension of just the NDE, but more into how profound he's deciphered his reality and where that's taken him in his life today. So welcome back to the podcast, my dear friend.
Thank you. It's so great to be here with you in person.
Yeah. It's always something so different when you're that human condition, the interaction, the connection with empathy, that signal that you get from the humanist that cannot be, I believe, replicated. There's a facsimile of it within the interweb, yet there's just this pure essence that is so important with human interaction, like physically, in my opinion.
It's wonderful because, there's an old saying, as you think, so you become. Well, what is it that makes you think a certain way? And we're certainly influenced by all sorts of things in life, but we can really be affected most deeply by vibration. And you can meet people that you have no history with, but you feel this connection to. And I think that physical reality bows to that. And I think that's why circumstances eventuated that brought me here in person.
Yeah.
It wasn't through any effort on either one of our parts.
Neither effort. And the amazing thing is this always draws me back to it. We had a brief conversation before the podcast. This is a visceral, somatic experience. This kinesthetic response that we're having from that is remembering, returning to who you are, which references what you're talking about. The vibration, the frequency, the resonance is just really the secret source of all things.
Big time.
It really is. And it does. It warms your heart. Anyone that is witnessing this or watching this in the interweb is going to experience there is a substance, an energy that comes with the interaction. It comes with the realization. It comes with the acknowledgement.
Yes.
Knowing.
And it's kind of like they say, leave things better than you found them, including people.
Yeah. I mean, when we speak and talk about all these incredible things and the insight that you've had, even leading up to this podcast, there's so much depth and so many really epiphanies that are parallel, if not speaking to the very path of a Taoist seeker. And you can't make this stuff up.
No.
It's really, and I mean, through your own admission, you'd share that you feel very much aligned with this type of path.
Absolutely. And I think key to that is part of letting go is do as much as you can to remove your filters.
Right.
And see things as they are. And I think a big part of that is in becoming detached is letting go of your desires and accepting your needs. Our needs are few. Our desires are limitless. And our desires have us chasing one thing after another all the time. But when we back off and just think about what our needs are, we ask our questions in a different way. For example, I used to tell my kids, when you're in high school and you're thinking, where's my perfect boyfriend? Where's my perfect girlfriend? I said, ask this question. How do I need to be loved? Because at the root of that is, man, know thyself. And once you know yourself, warts and all of a sudden people who've been standing in front of you all this time pop into focus. And that's your path.
Yeah. It's stepping past, because we talk about the void and that you're very familiar with it, and that in of itself is truly a deeper understanding of a Taoist path. And so, if we were to rewind back to how my teacher Lao Tzu explains it, is from the darkness comes the light and gives birth to the one. Through the womb of the primordial mother is creation of all things.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so with that, right, I think what you were very clear on, and this is a distraction for most people when they're on this path, is why am I here? Why do I exist? What is the purpose of my being? And this, within a Taoist path and any teaching that I share with others that my teachers teach me, why not?
And to that point, when people have asked me, so what is the purpose of life? It may not be a very satisfying answer, but I think it's my truest answer is to give life purpose.
Right.
Because the void says it's up to you.
Right.
What you see. It's up to you what you embody. It's up to you how you want to experience it. Like everybody comes to Disneyland here to ride the rides. But there are some people who like to go behind the rides and say, how can I make this work better? And if they do their job right, they're invisible.
Right.
That's the path.
Right, which leads us to realizing that to lead, you must do that from behind. You must assume the realization that the person that is seeking is the truth teller. The person that is seeking that absolute is their truth.
And according to the Tao, the best way to lead is from behind. Let everybody think it was their idea.
Right.
In other words, when you paint, as a leader, if you paint your vision of the future and where you want to take the company or people or whatever, do it in such a way that everyone can see where they fit into it and they can emotionally connect to what they can contribute. And just stand back and basically get out of the way. Leadership is about getting out of the way. You don't need a executive parking spot. You don't need the executive bathroom key. You're a servant. Love all, serve all.
Right.
And that's your philosophy. So, for example, when I talk to people and I coach them about how to apply for a job, I said, there are several things you can do to, I think, really shine. But one of the cool things is when it comes time to talk about references, if I say, like a lot of people, I could give you a CEO's reference or a general's reference or something like that, but all they're telling you is I'm a good worker bee. What if I gave you the references of people who worked under me? This would be their chance to kind of stick a knife in me if they ever had a grievance. But what if they come back and say, best manager I ever had? So now you're asking, do you want to hire a leader?
Yeah.
And say it's up to you as to what you want. And then you know if it's a fit by their answer.
Now, this is a very interesting intellectual perception now for someone that's seeking the truth, the nature of their reality. Because, I really parallel Taoism to a Gnostic path, a self-realization.
The not knower, or the knower. Sorry.
Right, the knower. You become the truth teller to your reality, and your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. That resorts back to the absolute truth being yours, not anyone else's.
True.
It's not Jim's, it's not mine, it's not Mary Sue's, it's the experiencer. And then how do you decipher that? I always share with people the decipherer, the very symbolism, as you would speak on it. Everything comes in the form of symbols. We talk about this from even a psychological perspective, a hypnotherapist perspective, a hypnotic state of awareness from even the people that I teach that are remote viewing and doing things of that nature. I have a lot of dear friends that are world-renowned remote viewers. How I teach it and how they teach it is similar, but yet understanding this ideomodal response, ideogram messaging that comes from the unconscious. You are the divinity, the tuning fork of this information. It transmutes through you and it presents itself in your reality. And so that deciphering tool that we use within Taoism, that charge you got right now, that's this present moment. This is a word that the language is irrelevant. But
True.
The visceral feeling that you're getting from it
True.
is the indicator that we are in the perfect place we need to be. That's the void. That's the Wu Ji.
Exactly.
Within Taoism, we call it the mother, the Wu Ji, between
Yes.
the breath in and the breath out.
Yeah. And it's interesting, beyond the words, beyond the symbols, and even beyond the vibration is the question of what is the underlying reality here? Because so many times the thing is not about the thing.
Well, that brings us right back to the deciphering of all messaging within Taoism.
Mm-hmm.
The name that is named is not the name.
Exactly.
The way that is walked is not the way. Tao is both named and nameless.
And to that point as well, I remember the Dalai Lama one time said, religion is the tip of the finger. Spirituality is the moon to which the finger points.
Right.
And so many ways there are to get to the moon.
And you bring the moon up, which is really the pure source of the primordial mother that we speak of. And so when I take people into the internal alchemy, which within this electromagnetic spectrum, you have to identify the material, and to enter that center point, that material, to dissolve that, to realize that you are the creator of that. It may come in the form of a physics, zero and ones interpretation of what is reality,
sure.
which, you take a polymath and
Yes.
you're going to have a very interesting, and I could probably lean on you as tagging you as a polymath, and you're so humble in your deciphering of this information, but it's so powerful that you can just bring it all together at once without thinking. There is no thought behind the transmission that Jim receives within his journey.
It's interesting when you talk about math. The key to understanding the language of math is the power of visualization. And that is also not a bad thing in a spiritual path.
And that's where that Wu Ji, the center point between the breath in and the breath out, will refer to the bellows. Everything is the bellows.
Isn't it?
And man is not like that. So when you realize, as the Jade Emperor would say, one of my teachers, when you realize, when you believe, when you know you are not of this body, what can harm you?
Exactly. Because
Nothing.
your story doesn't begin here and it doesn't end here. We're just all passing through.
And that nourishment from this energetic potential is why people gravitate to Taoism, because the alchemical processes is the decipherer of this electromagnetic spectrum. You want to enter the Wu Ji, that is not of this world, my friend.
Right.
That is perfection manifest.
Yes.
That is the mother. That is God. That is Buddha. That is
the source.
The source. And it has a completely different profile. And of course, when you are in the presence of the source, you are not in lack of.
Right.
You are not in need of. You are the present moment. And that makes it possible, and what we speak of, and you can experience Wu Wei. Effortless effort, effortless action. What Bruce Lee brought to the attention of the world. The flow, baby.
Yes.
And then serendipity, synchronicity, all these things start to just flow, as you put it.
One time when I used to live in Africa, I was talking to a Kalahari bushman, and he said something that was so cool. He says, sometimes the best way to hunt is to just sit and wait. To be in a state of readiness, to be in a state of, that your preparation is to be nothing more than ready.
Right.
And so you're alert. I've quoted that, like in sitting in meditation, be like a cat that sits there and watches a mouse hole.
Right.
You're ready, but you're not distracted by all the what ifs.
Right.
You're just ready.
And that brings me to a dear friend of mine, James Tunney, who's a scholar and such an interesting character, a spiritual conscious collector, rooted in Catholicism, a devout Catholic, yet has such an insight into what the true nature of reality is. And he brings to our conversation such rich, beautiful insight, just as yours is just so beautiful. It's so now. And there's nothing that we need to do more than be present to experience that. And so, he reminds us of the spiritual war that takes place, and we bring it to your attention. The attention, that's all it is. Where is your attention being put that creates the intention that is realized?
Exactly. And I think as part of our understanding of that, the question is, how we apply attention, because it is attention that gives life to things. When we were young, oh, I can't wait to have that car. So you're reading up on this one car you want to have, and you're giving it your attention. So for that time, it has life, and it has attraction, and you have desires. And then the first little scratch you get on it, or the toy we had to have when we were a child, and then 3 months later it's under the bed gathering dust. Where we put our attention is where life is. And that's a magical formula. So as you think, so you become. And like I said, that vibration is real key to it. So we need to be careful about where we put our attention. And the more we can think about the void, try for the void, don't judge ourselves harshly. Just know we're doing the best we can. And so are most people. One of the things I've come to believe is that, for example, there are no good or bad people. They're just people who make, let's say, fortunate and unfortunate choices. But because our story doesn't begin here and it doesn't end here, we can learn, we can grow, and we can go home.
And that brings me to the return, which is the realization of every seeker, especially every Taoist seeker. My position as a catalyst and conduit for the very source of information that I share with others is to help them, to reach out and guide them to their own return, their own realization. And that frequency is then embodied, and people are able to hold that. And once it's repeatable, that's why the cultivational practices, in my opinion, are so expansive for the journey. You as a seeker need to validate, because until you remove the veil, which is the imagination, that's the entry point to the Wu Ji, you need to be able to satisfy that humanistic curiosity, embodying that heteroaction of start to finish. When you and I realize, when you return, there is no start or end to anything. You are all things and nothing at the same time. And that is a very interesting contemplation for anyone. It's like, it's always, Juffa, what do you mean? Is your glass half empty or full?
Exactly. And I think that's a real key to it is, it kind of gets back to something a lot of people are talking about these days, but it's been talked about for a long time, and that's living authentically. If like for a lot of people, when they first, for example, hear Buddhism, what do you mean Buddhists don't necessarily believe in God? How does that work? But the thing is, if you live authentically, even an atheist can live a spiritual life. And that is key. And I think it's practicing that you could say is preparing you to live a life that is spiritual if you're not quite there yet, but just constantly. Because I think many people who are deeply invested in religion may not be living authentically because they're not truly aligned with some of the values that are stated because of things they came here to work out. And some of these things you work out behind closed doors, some things you work out in secret, some things you work out openly. But if it's an unresolved desire, it will bring you back.
Yeah, it brings you back. And, these, how do I put it? I always remind people you're not aligned, and that's when you discover there's something more.
Bingo.
All of a sudden, you're not aligned, which would resort to something that people are familiar with, NDE, OBE. Mm-hmm. These are the things that bring your attention to the truth and go, whoa, I thought I had it all handled. I thought everything was, but this was bringing your awareness to the true nature of reality. The truth is beyond this, what we would consider the material. you enter into this state. Now, for an OBE, when I teach people out of body, astral projection, however you want to, it's a state of awareness where you become all things and nothing at the same time. And when that is obtained, that energetic potential is realized through your own practices. The experiencer then validates it for themselves. It's not a Jim says something, Son says something, oh, guess what? Now we're off to the races. Mm-hmm. No. Very important for me as this conduit to share this information. My teachers, the three pure ones, make it very clear. They teach you through the experience.
Yes.
They teach you through the somatic, visceral experience that comes from the body. The body is a tuning fork that helps you realize these things. And as you enter into something, well, I don't feel my body, I'm just nothing. You are still registering it somewhere. And so that's the value of what this human condition is from the turning point of a knower, from a seeker. And so when you get into that, so I'm not aligned. So there's something more. And then when you obtain that, you raise yourself up beyond what someone would call this. From a Taoist perspective, it's a frequency. As you said, the decipherer, that incredible deciphering tool, the yin and yang, that, I could go anywhere in the world, go down the street, go into Vegas, I capture someone's attention by going, do you know what that is? I was just telling this story the other day on a podcast. And I saw this guy with a yin and yang tattooed on his forehead. I was like, do you have any idea what that is? He goes, yeah, I got buzzed. I was downtown and I felt compelled to put this on because it made me feel this way. And I said, well, what does it mean to you? Well, it's like good or bad. Good and bad, right?
Polarity.
Yeah. Polarity. And of course, this is the distraction. The deciphering part is when you look at that symbol, because it's so powerful, we refer to the ideograms, the information that is being communicated through you, whether you're conscious of it or not. It's happening all the time right now. And so when you turn into the Sherlock Holmes, elementary, my dear Watson, of your own reality, these things all start to fall into place. It's like, you could call it from a psychologist perspective, the RAS, the reticular activative system. That would be a term that someone would use to identify how you create a synchronicity, how you create deja vu. Is you put that out there, which then refers to, as you put it out into the universe echoes it back to you from a laws of attraction perspective. Now, within Taoism, this is the mirroring effect, the very distortion. You will find yourself as whole when you presented with the mother, and you will need for nothing. You will be selfless and in servitude as the true nature and default of who you really are, and that comes from that whole. And how do we find it as a Taoist seeker?
By letting go. You
let go. And another tool that we use is the Tao Te Ching. It's like that's the mirroring effect of that. So, Lao Tzu always speaks on this. The primordial mother creates the actual essence and experience that he is, the father, the fatherly energy. That is a nurturing energy, a shelter, a protection, a resolve that when you're in absence of that, he makes it whole. And through that transmission, as we continue to speak on this, it becomes more and more palpable within this space where the two of us are experiencing that. It's like toffee. The energy is starting to percolate. It's starting to oscillate. It's present, and that is part of the knowing right now.
Absolutely. I don't have anything to add to that. Because I'm feeling very present. Words drift away.
And so when you're like that, you start to realize, because you spend a lot of your time when I use my tools of deciphering, when I look at your aura, when I look at your expansion, you spend very little time within the physical body. You are, which is that present moment.
It's the physical is that which we could say, been there, done that.
Yeah.
On to the next adventure.
Right.
You know,
right.
and that's higher,
Right.
and higher,
Right.
and higher.
And you know, I always get people to identify. Well, Jifu, I want to get into, you know, the cultivational practices. It's exciting for me. That is part of the seeker's journey. Is once you acquire it, it returns you to being whole. So whether you witness a physical healing, a manifestation, magic in of itself within Taoism, we're steeped in ritual and magic and all these kinds of things, and they develop and they percolate, they connect, because the mirroring effect of what we use, you know, star stepping and grids for, is mirroring the universe within this plane.
And I think that a big part of that growth is learning how to parse things out. For example, you know, a lot of people in the world are pursuing things that they think gives them joy, not realizing it's like a cat licking a whetstone that doesn't realize that the blood it's tasting is not from the whetstone but from its own tongue. And yet nothing was put here for our enjoyment. It was put here for our correct use, and it's in its correct use we find joy.
Booyah.
Yeah.
Because that there you feel absent of thought. Just you sharing that dissolves the doubt, dissolves the intellect, and creates the present moment.
And leaves only what is there.
Right, right.
And what was already there.
Right.
And house cleaning.
Right. And this is very profound for many to experience this, the way that you and I are really doing this oscillating dance of realization. Yet there are many that are still in doubt, that as you refer to your own understanding, you came to a realization, the messaging of the sun through information, sharing it through its reflection, that you are able to obtain a deeper access point to that.
It's amazing, and it's something that was, you know, if you just walk your path, these unexpected things pop up as you unfold, as you unpack, as you realize new levels of communication, both out and in. And I don't know, it just brings so much awareness on so many levels. And certainly one of the latest things I've had, I would say latest, it really started with my NDE though. And that was just to be able to look at reflected sunlight, and there's information there, and information that, like, where did that come from? How did that come from sun reflecting off water, or a tree, or a building? It's like, how did I know how to do these things? And like I mentioned, all of a sudden I knew how to build a therapeutic laser that blends 5 wavelengths together that accelerates healing by 43% when applied. Okay, you're just along for the ride, and just stay out of the way. The letting go is staying out of the way and just letting these things unfold and saying, okay, let's run with this. Obviously, it's about leaving things better than you found them. But it's better if you can do it in a way that you take no credit or take the least credit you have to, and do that in an exemplary way that shows people true leadership. That, again, the best way to lead is from behind. And if you do this, people will show up when they need to show up to help you, and it will become this great group effort, and everybody celebrates the success.
Yeah. I mean, it brings me to a really powerful incantation that one of my teachers, the Jade Emperor, always uses. A power abundant in its giving you will receive, unifying the body with the spirit with the energy, bringing heaven to earth, transcending all is one, one is all, revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering.
And
that is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. Now, the reason for that mirroring effect brings it right back to your deciphering and understanding of how you obtain information through the lens of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
The simplicity of that. It's like, hang on, I just acquired this awareness and it makes sense to me.
And even that is still an intermediary step, isn't it?
Mm.
Toward the ultimate contemplation of the void from which all information could come.
Right.
I mean, the void itself is what expresses itself as yin and yang. Yin and yang is not the goal as much as many people would think it is. It's the doorway.
Yeah. It's, as we would refer to it, as the primordial mother.
Mm.
And so then it brings life. 1 to the 2, 2 to the 3, to the 9, to all things.
Right. And it's really important as we have our unfolding, as we have our epiphanies and experience our synchronicities, to remember we have to be very gentle with those who are still coming up behind us. And I don't mean to make that too locational, but you understand what I'm saying, is that some of them are just hanging on by their teeth in desperation to something that even points towards solace. And we can't go, wrecking their house. We just have to realize everybody has to start where they are.
And, that's a beautiful point you make, because I remind people, when you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own.
It's so true, because, so many people, when they think they found something, and even they have found something, it's so easy to so in the effort of wanting to identify with it, to sometimes speak in a way that could be hurtful to people or dismissive, not understanding that they're still working through their stuff, and I think that's where empathy plays a big role.
Well, that's that realization within the human condition.
We're all one.
And that's that selflessness.
Yeah.
And, for you and I, we're deeply on our path, aware for many, many biological years in this incarnation. Mm. But the reality for many is they have this sudden epiphany from not being aligned. Mm-hmm. That gives them this desire, as you put it, to chase the spiritual dragon.
True. And it's interesting because this, as we talk about being aligned or not aligned, unaligned, and we think about what is it that puts us in that certain place at that certain time. Again, I get back to, is what you're doing desire-based or is it intention-based? Because there is a big difference. Desire is very much about the target of what you think you want, whereas attention is the originator of the action. Desire is the target. So it's to imagine ourselves as the doer is an illusion. And it's in that illusion that thinking we're the doer that karma is generated. But if we have an intention, we can sit in the void and aim the vacuum of the intention in a direction that we perceive it needs to go. And that invites the universe to send people to us to help, to send circumstances that will unfold. And again, it's by not doing anything. And that is one of the indicators that maybe you're starting to follow the right path.
Well, a dear friend of the channel, E from his channel, Y Dharma, would speak it, being done by the Tao. And when you're done, your completion, you think it's over, but the student is the teacher is the student. It's forever. And the end is never. Mm-hmm. And that is the perplexing part from a Taoist, is being able to contract and expand at the same time,
like
being
breathing.
all things and nothing at the same time, identifying your choice is half empty, half full, and then sitting with, as you put it, the void, and realizing that that's the truth.
From the void, all things come.
And within a Taoist secret, that is, from the void creates the light.
Mm-hmm.
From the light creates the birth.
Yeah.
From the womb. And then we refer to the cycle of that to creation of man within a 9-month cycle. What a coincidence. The highest number within Taoism is 9. And you reference as you go, hang on a second. It takes 9 months to create life. That's a coincidence, or is it? And then you start realizing that this is, as you put it, within everything that you observe, is this information. It's all there for you.
And that really points to such a beautiful truth that all lessons are within everything. You know, you could just walk around and just look at the world around you and look at people around you. You can just learn so much. You can see where it's pointing. And it's all about, not in and of itself, the entire course, it's where it's pointing. Because one thing I've realized is how much the void or the universe, it enjoys our sense of discovery. And usually things are worth what they cost. If it were just given to us, would we value it? But if we take a chance, if we walk a path in life and we take, both the rewards and the hard knocks into consideration, that, whatever you could call it, hard-won victory, is going to be much more valuable to us, and it's going to be much more insightful. And we're going to come out knowing so much more about ourselves and other people and life in general. But these lessons are baked into every moment, and every moment is superimposed on it so many choices, and it's our filters that limit those choices that we see. So the fewer filters we have, the more open we are, the more infinite our number of choices we can make. That's big.
Perfection. And you talk about that, and then it reminds me of the Jet Emperor and what he speaks on, which is, when you truly accept you know nothing, you know everything.
You really cleaned house.
And that's it. And there's so many people that hold the torch to their belief system, and we're going, it's very popular right now. Being on this path over 30 years, I've witnessed many transformations from something that would be a paranormal, probably psychotic episode, which would resort in an exorcism, because that's what I teach people. That's what I'm ordained in, that very ritual. It's very tangible, very real. And guess what? That energetic potential is created by the seeker. And that's a very big pill to swallow when someone goes, hang on a second, I could spend decades not witnessing this type of energetic potential, but for the seeker crossing the path, creating the resonance, and then they're like, I want to be free of this energy potential. And that turns it into something that I would never have created due to my own resonance, yet the individual seeker has created this, what we would call, from my dear friend the Buddhist monk Martin, the dukkha, the distortion. And so you create that, and I'm not dismissing it by any stretch of the imagination. When you witness the visceral response of someone removing this type of frequency, it looks like something out of the movies. I'm not going to lie to you. That's what it is. You can literally embody that frequency like we are now, and you feel it. It starts to percolate. As you feel more and more, it returns to the simplicity of, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling.
As you say this, I'm reflecting on something. And, you know, like when people have near-death experiences, for example, and that's, certainly been a big part of my entry point, some people who may have been psychic come back more psychic. Some who weren't come back so. And the first, few conferences I went to, I go very aware of what I don't know, right? And I'm puzzled why, having been given this gift, this little shake-up that, the physical life isn't who you are, why some people come back and say, okay, I'm going to write a book about talking to dead people, and that will drive people to the more expensive workshops, and then I also can be contacted for a lot of money per hour to talk to your dead grandma, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, didn't I just go where the dead go? What do they know? And I think a lot of times when we take these dawning awarenesses and try to, for example, monetize them or use them to gain popularity, we're really getting more wrapped around the axle of the world. I'm asking, where's the person who's going to walk out here and say, how do I distill the grapes of this experience into the wine of wisdom? How do I grow internally from this? It's not for show. I mean, whether you make money or not, I don't really care. But, how do I get the most, what is the central most thread to this to follow? What is it really saying? Again, what is the underlying reality? And for me, it's been, this isn't your home, and it's time to go home. So let's think about all the choices that are before you that you could choose that will align your path more in the direction of going home. And it really came back, like I said, to letting go. And I was told by my near-death experience, all the force of will you will ever need is found in the art of letting go. Always live life in celebration of the individual spirit. For no one and no thing can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul. So let's go with that.
Beautiful. It really is beautiful. I mean, the messaging comes clear through your insight, through your NDE, how you identify that information, how it's acquired, this awareness. It's there. It's present. It's still present in you now. I could be very clear to say that quite comfortably that you don't claim to know anything.
Exactly.
And I'm in the same camp. It's
It's about comparing notes. We're walking, rather than sitting across the table as like, therapist and client or something like that, right? We're walking side by side down a path comparing notes.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I define spiritual consciousness, right? You're sitting at one end of the table, I'm sitting at the other. There's an orange in the middle of the table. You see it your way, I see it mine. You say tomato, I say tomato. But it's still cut from the same cloth of perfection,
exactly,
which is the mother.
And what we should do is, if you say tomato and I say tomato, we should laugh.
Right.
That should be our reaction to it.
Right. Yeah. And what is the only thing that you know, that the only truth is this now moment?
How ephemeral it is. And yet, this moment has happened for eons.
Right.
Because times change, but people don't.
Right. And that human experience can be so intricate and analytic and introspective that you lose yourself. And that's the distraction of this experience, is to realize that looking outside of yourself, you're in the wrong direction. You must return to the center.
And for many of us, the only way we can know or to understand what the signposts are, what the milestones are, how do I know I'm going in the right direction? And for some of this, it's like when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, there may be no manuals that really address it. for example, for a period of time I realized, why do I feel like I'm becoming forgetful about things? Like I work in IT, I do project management. I can carry a 1,200 line project plan in my head and tell you the percentage complete of each line. But if I meet somebody, I might say, I can't remember the name, but I know it was consonant, vowel, consonant, or consonant, consonant, or something like that. And they say, yeah, it's Bill. Oh yeah, that fits that formula, because I become a little more formulaic in how I see life operating. And then I realized, through the insight of a very close friend who just always seems to say the right thing at the right time, and she said, when you start elevating your consciousness and living in higher spheres, you do appear to become forgetful, because you no longer need your history to define who you are. You start to fly without a net and live from intuition. And in so doing, you receive what you need when you need it, and when you no longer need it, you let it go. And that could be amazing knowledge. That could be what appears to be a quantum leap in terms of what you thought you knew, or what people thought you knew before, but you don't hold on to anything. And I found a lot of comfort in that at the time. And so, like I say, sometimes when I've been, for some reason, it's been important to the void that I be able to shift my mind between linear thinking and nonlinear thinking. And a big part of the exercise was how to do it instantly. So it would present me with something, and then it's like it took over the steering wheel, right? And I started shifting to seeing it linear, nonlinear, linear, nonlinear. And it was amazing how in the linear mode I had memory, so I had prediction of where things were going. But in nonlinear, it's like watching a film one frame at a time, and only being in that frame, and just hoping, is there a frame that's going to come up with enough elements that I can piece together what's really happening? Because otherwise it's like going to a movie theater with an amnesiac. What's happening now? What's happening now? It can be a little irritating to the uninitiated, but it's because you become so in the moment. And like I say, when you're in that place, you can't remember what you just said, and you can't anticipate what you're about to say. But at the end of the day, people go, wow, that was great. It's like, okay, I was really just kind of along for the ride. I don't know. Because you're starting to become a channel. It's cool, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that identification of something that is nothing is the perplexing part of the seeker. Mm-hmm. Because I always reference, even though I may be a fanboy as an ordained priest and on the path for 30 years consciously, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the currency that we operate in, you must master that so that you can really embody as nothing this path, so that the servitude is the default. The servitude is that very walking from behind to lead the people to their very realization of returning.
And it's funny how, when you reference electromagnetic spectrum, how for a lot of people who have had higher experiences, how we have these electromagnetic anomalies going on in life. It might be a bag full of blown light bulbs. It might be the depletion of batteries. They talk about street lights turning on and off. But for me, while those things have happened, including blowing up the entire HVAC system in my house and 4 of the 5 damper motors that no one could explain, it's been communication. I remember one time when I was going to visit PMH Atwater,
that's right,
who's a very dear friend. When I was 20, I had my phone up on my dash with the GPS program running, and all of a sudden, an NDE friend started, texting me through Facebook Messenger, so that popped up. And she said, I don't know why, but I'm thinking about you. And I said, because I'm 20 minutes away from PMH's house. And then all of a sudden, with, for example, that particular thing, Facebook Messenger, when the other person is typing, you see these little dots appearing to tell you, wait to respond, let them respond. And while that's happening, and I know she's typing a response, suddenly my text field, I'm driving, started writing by itself. And it literally was said, "Thank you for being a kind and loving person." Now, who was saying that? Where was that coming from? And that was pretty cool. And I told PMH, and she just laughed and said, "This is just the beginning." And the morning my mother passed away, I don't know why. I just said to my phone or something, "Hey, Mom, how are you doing?" And Siri woke up and said, "I'm fine." It's amazing when this almost starts to become your norm, and you don't even bat an eye. And it's so nice to even have a taste of how everything is connected and that it's all okay. And so, people have talked to me about death, near-death experience, what was it like, because they want to know whether they should be afraid, right? And you say, you don't have to be afraid. It's kind of like watching television and changing channels. When you change the channel to a new program on TV, how much are you thinking about the channel you just left? Not much. You're kind of really engrossed in what's in front of you, And talking to parents who have lost children, because I can empathize with that, having been a parent. And I said, well, you weren't born to suffer. And if the dead are hanging around, like your child's hanging around in its less than physical form and seeing your suffering, it tears them up. This is one of the reasons they may leave in the end. And I said, at the end of the day, it's understandable when the last emotion left to you is grief, that to surrender that is to abandon your child. That's how you feel. But you'll only suffer for as long as you want to suffer. And you just need to let them go. And I've had people come back and say that helped them. It's always, if you try to find the right thing to say, it's very hard. But if you go into the void, the words come with the vibration they need to have the impact they should.
Now, you speak of these very clear descriptions of what it is that the experiencer can validate the now. These are like mechanisms in some ways, because you're building blocks on, identifying that everything has energetic potential, and that energy is generating a vibration. That vibration has a frequency. The frequency of resonated, and holding that. Oh yes, it will be yours. Oh yes. I mean, the manifestation teachers and peddlers of this very understanding talks about that resonance. Talks about, if you hold it, you just identify the resonance. Now, what are your personal practices for your own cultivation?
I think the most poignant way I could reflect on that is, how a lot of people talk about manifestation. And they may express that saying, "Oh, we're going to talk about prosperity consciousness." It seems to always be about money or something. I don't know. And it's like, okay. But beyond that, I'm going to use this as a construct. The idea of meditation is to become empty. And that, to me, is practicing, where you want to call it, creating a void, joining with the void, being aware of the void, bringing the void in, whatever. Void is the central concept there. And as we said, it's from the void all things come. So for me, it's about, I don't think I create anything, but it's about bringing the void in, or being aware of the void. It's connecting to the void. And then it's about directing the void through intention, not desire. Because when you say desire, you're telling the void there's only one way I'm going to accept help. Like buy a lottery ticket and it wins, or something really limited. But if it's through intention, then, and especially if it's intention based on need more than a desire, then the right people just start showing up. Or people you haven't talked to in 35 years suddenly say, I don't know why I was thinking about you. And they may be important to where you want to go or what you want to do. But it's really about letting the universe fill in the gaps where it says these gaps need to be filled. And you don't try and control anything. That's a big part of it. That's a big part of the letting go.
I think that is beautiful for the person who has released the identity, has surrendered the identity, that no longer can perceive the humanness, and they're like, okay, this is the access point. This is like Luke Skywalker, one shot at the Death Star. Once you hit that, as you mentioned it before, the vibration, the resonance, it starts to present itself, and through that repeatable experience, it becomes more solidified, and then all of a sudden it's no longer a fleeting moment, but it's actually, for this material, tangible.
And that's why I've said before, to use the Christian model for a moment, when Jesus said, or in the Bible it says, pray without ceasing. Well, whether we say pray without ceasing or meditate without ceasing or contemplate without ceasing, I would say that's when it becomes who you are and not what you do. For when you live a prayerful life, you'll never have to pray again.
Right.
That's where you want to be.
Right.
And like, with us having a 53% divorce rate in America and 78% divorce rate with NDEers, you start to realize you can live a spiritual life with a spouse. You can live a spiritual life without a spouse. But you cannot live a spiritual life against a spouse. And even in my own case, I became a statistic after my NDE. And we went to 18 months of marriage therapy to see what there was to save. And at one point, the in-between welled up within me, and I said, whatever bad habits you say I have I exhibited any of these since and I had to say accident because she didn't like the idea of the NDE. They're both two sides of the same coin. And she said no, because she wasn't a bad person. She was a good person. She said no. I said, that's because that person died in my plane crash. And this is what you have left. And to put a sharp point on it, our marriage vow said, till death do us part. What happens when one of us dies? No matter that we return. Our covenant is broken. And the only reason we stay together now is because we simply choose to. That truth was not well received. So, but it was the truth, and it was the eventual reality of things. And so one of the things you said a moment ago made me think, not all truths are for all people, because they're just not ready. And it's not for me to decide who's ready or not. It's for me to, through my empathy and my awareness and being present, to try to understand how to best tailor my message to the audience, if you will. And sometimes that's with word, and sometimes it's through example. As I mentioned, recently I signed a book to a woman whose husband died in a plane crash, looking for a sense of connection to her husband. And when I signed the book to her, I normally put in today's date, or that day's date. And for some reason, without knowing, I happened to write the date that was their wedding anniversary. And when she told me about it and that it gave her goose chills, I said, well, now you have a magic book. And you can feel connected to your husband, But I didn't know anything about it, nor did I need to. The best thing about being open is that if it's part of it that you're a channel, the less of you that's in the flow, the more pure the flow is. Right?
I would agree. I mean, the return that we keep speaking of, that we've spoken about throughout the whole of this podcast, is be childlike in your nature.
Big time.
accept everything as is.
And think of it as
Accept and
play.
allow. It's like, that's the part where I wake up every morning as if the first time I ever laid eyes on my wife. I wake up every morning as if the first time I ever laid eyes on my children.
That's lovely.
Every time I wake up, it's a new day, a new beginning, as if it's the first day.
Make every
And
moment
that
new.
gratitude is how you find a path that will be realized as the now moment. And that, for me, that's why I bring us back to, there are so many profound things that you've said that gives you understanding to your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that your channel, you mentioned the channel. Now, for me, when I channel, and I'm doing it all, we're all doing it all the time. But
True.
There is a very profound shift of energetic potential within the space that I'm in, occupying it, whether physically or over the interweb, when the presence of any of my teachers are there. It's very palpable. It's a substance. And doing this 32 years consciously, the reality is it always comes from above. I've never seen the energy come from the side, come from below. There is a palpable, you could kind of describe it like a portal from, I always reference Star Trek, they're just teleporting. You're experiencing, it's visceral. Through our conversation, any of my students, teachers, students or disciples, or anyone that follows this channel would be able to experience our communication right now. There is a presence of something greater as we speak. It's just here. And that's that oscillating effect. And the more and more it's just here, the more and more we speak on it, the more and more absent we are of our identity. And we're now this present moment. And like that, the way that energy. So do you, as your own transcriber of this experience that you're observing, do you focus any of your attention to the energetic profiles specifically? Because this is where I always come back to my teaching, and that alchemical processes are very fundamental. It's like we can go deep into it.
I would think my instinct is to approach it generally. It's the qualities of the experience that make me attend specifically. I'll give you an example. I've talked about reflected light and information. In my near-death experience, it was a very post-apocalyptic, heavy-duty clouds. There was some sunlight, right? Interestingly, when I watch films from around the world, and having been a filmmaker, I'm very sensitive to photography means painting with light, or writing with light. And films that are done in Northern Europe, I would say, like in Scandinavia, the light angle, I've seen that angle. And I've wondered, what's up with that? But when I used to live up in New England, I would say at a certain time of year, as the light changes, as the seasons come and go, there would be, like in late September, there would be, on a certain day at a certain time, that light angle matched. And if I looked out the window and saw that light angle and that quality of light, it was like a punch to the stomach, because that was my guidance with pain on the other side to make better choices. And in that split second, I felt it, and it would take me 3 or 4 days to get over it. So there's a specificity there to the general condition of the lighting. But that specificity is part of our focus. It's part of how we give attention. And even though that you might say, well, so what to that, right? It's the practice that you're gaining that you can apply thereafter. And that's why I say sometimes the thing isn't about the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That present moment. We return to the
You're
present
practicing
moment.
being present in whatever it is. I mean, if you go play in a sandbox with kids and you're really present, okay, well, you're practicing being present. We're always practicing for the next step.
Well, it's being able to also affirm or discern what that is.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And so that's really where it goes beyond the notion of good and bad, too. It's just the art. Like, when say a person just loves shooting their bow and arrow, right, at a target. If they go out and just shoot for joy, they'll hit the bullseye every time. But if you offer them a gold ring, their hand begins to shake. If you offer them a chest of gold, their hand shakes so bad they can't hit the target at all. And why is that? Because they're now thinking about winning instead of thinking about shooting. This is the parsing that focus brings. When you can see, without thinking about it, what things are and what they're not.
And that's, for me, I always return back to this is a barometer, a tuning fork. Because if you cannot validate that as the experiencer, it becomes of no use to your expansion. Because there has to be some type of like way for you to realize that. Like you shared with me photos just recently of you that showed the presence of some supernatural energetic potential that was evident in the photos. That this is also, from your own admission, a way of messaging that you're very familiar with, a way of understanding that has been communicated for you through your natural born life, a much deeper understanding of this messaging, bringing us back to that idea, the ideomotor, the ideogram, this idea that this is how you're receiving your messaging. Now, I always tell people, I can put you in a room, turn the lights out, and hand you a pile of clay, and you play with it, and you're like, oh wow, this is clay, wow. I turn the light on, and you realize it's dog shit, and you go, whoa, I could swear on something that this was something else, and this is where, until you remove the emotional content of the human condition, you will be subject to this subjective viewpoint of reality, which will come in the form of a belief system, and that belief system will be limited because this is your only, basically, foundation for your house. And if it fails, then your house will crumble. And so that's why I always return back to the energetic potential, right? When we talk about that, this is the currency, and it's so easy to align with the sort of sensory perception, the skill set that will give you a very clear pathway to go, okay, I'm presently in the void. Forget about the the intellect that might be distracting me. I am there. This resonance is not questioned. I'm experiencing it. So this is my now moment. This is my Death Star moment. This is the now. Yet I may have a little distraction with my intellect, yet the experience validates the truth. It's like contracting and expanding. You're either expanding or contracting. When you're in the presence of someone that you perhaps may not be resonating with you, you'll contract. It's like, okay, now I'm contracting. Is that something I want more of or less of? The indication would say I want less.
Correct. Where some of that, because that's a wonderful concept, wonderful truth. Where that's been meaningful for me is originating from my NDE was being aware of, for want of better vocabulary, being aware of two minds operating within me at all times. There's the reactive mind that operates in the world. But there's the silent observer that just watches without reaction, without judgment. It just watches. And it's the discerning mind. And I mean, when I built and flew my first aircraft, which is a World War I replica, it was very tricky to fly. And I didn't mean to fly it on that day. I just thought I'm going to do a high-speed taxi. But it started getting so squirrely that the only way to save the plane was to fly it. And as I flew the circuit around, I had that sewing machine leg going on, but that implies nervousness. But, I know how to fly, so I was able to function. But the silent observer mind was hovering right over my right shoulder just watching. And I was glad to kind of be more in that space than I was I was on autopilot. My body just knew what to do. But I was sitting there in the midst of this crisis thinking, this is interesting. I was really entertaining more what was going on at a higher level. And going through the ups and downs of life, I tend to watch it from the observer mind. Like, how's the reactive mind going to deal with this now? And, one of the things I learned was, like if you see, as part of spiritual growth says, you're going to see certain relationships pass away, And some of these relationships, you may struggle more with their loss than others because of a deeper attachment or deeper whatever, expectations. We are still operating in the human sphere. But what was interesting is the day that I learned that nostalgia literally translates as our pain. Now that brings power. And again, why am I licking that whetstone, thinking the blood I taste is not from me? And then you let it go, right? And sometimes we just have to go through things because they do teach us about ourselves. We gain greater awareness. And for me, a lot of it has been, kind of goes back to the depersonalization I had in my NDE, which I think was the gift of detachment. Because when you've had everything from you stripped away that you thought you were, in my NDE it said, do you remember the body to which you belong? I said, no, I can't. And it said, you see the truth and how the past is dust. I didn't have a name. If someone had come to me and said, if you stay here any longer, you can't go back, I'd say, go back where? To your family. What family? Earth. What's earth? I was that much stripped away. And how that, like I said, how that demonstrates itself here is detachment, the ability to pretty much walk away from anything and not have any anger about it, not have any disappointment, not feel any attachment. But you also realize that what example does it set to the others if you appear to care so less about things? Are they just thinking, are you teaching them it's okay to do this to other people? So sometimes you feel like just on the principle of almost teaching, you have to act as if it's important, even if it's not. It's because it would not be to their advantage to do this again to anyone else. It's kind of a strange quandary sometimes, and yet in your heart of hearts, you don't really care.
Well, that's kind of that realization that you are not of this body.
Mm-hmm. That's the practice.
Right.
Everything else is just decoration.
Well, for a Taoist, the practice is to continually reinforce that knowing. Mm-hmm. And that comes from that alchemical processes. And it's not just the void will, the mother will show you how all of a sudden something that was very limited is now unlimited from you maintaining that resonance. And that resonance, I mean, when you talk about once you had your NDE, did you ever pursue repeating out-of-body experiences, or you just maintain that? I mean,
it was more a maintenance,
right?
And understanding that whatever, I mean, I've had the out-of-body experiences, but understanding that I will be given what I need to be given at the time I need to be given it. It's not something I actively pursue. Even in meditation. Example? As I mentioned, I went down to Charlotte to be with my mom to help take care of her while she took about 2 or 3 months to pass away. And it was really nice. We got to kind of close some open loops from childhood. But on the morning of the day she died, my meditation experiences seemed to spontaneously happen between like 5 and 7 a.m. in the morning. And in this one, I went out of the body. And my mother and I were in this place that we were before we were both born. And she was talking about, okay, it's kind of, if this is the gist of the conversation, it's like she was saying, okay, we're both going to go down here and be born. I'll go first, and then you come later. I'll be the mom, you'll be my son. And she was like really excited about this. And I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. But what's interesting is she didn't talk about these are the kind of lives we're going to live. Her milestone for our time together were the emotions we were going to feel. That was what got her all excited, was we're going to have these emotions. These were her milestones. And I understand that our logic tells us what should be correct. Our emotions tell us what's important, which to me is important. And it was obviously important that we have these emotions that a mother and her child would have together. And then I remembered I did have those emotions when I was a baby. So when I came back, I said, well, Mom, well done, job accomplished. And that's the day she died.
Wow.
We'd experienced all the emotions we planned on having from the moment I was born until the day she died.
And that is really profound, because, again, being the creator of your reality and being this now moment, and that emotional content would be still very distorted due to your life experience. And so to feel complete, to feel at home, to return, and through your own admission with your mother, to feel whole. All of a sudden, now I'm whole, now I'm home, now I have returned. And that is part of that deciphering that human beings have, is, well, I get angry, I get emotional, I get, frustrated. This is very much the turbulence and the distraction, and how through your own experience, once you return back,
right, and you understand souls come here for all sorts of reasons. Like I said, it's like going to Disneyland and riding the rides. Some people like the gut-wrenching roller coasters, some like the haunted houses, some like the teacups, and some like just maybe, eating at the restaurants or going to the water parks. All sorts of reasons people come here. And our relationships with people, even in the beyond, can influence our own journey in returning. Even if maybe we came just to kind of ride shotgun to their own adventure. Again, it's about letting go.
It sounds so simplistic.
It is.
Well, of course, you and I identify
when we
that.
clean house, when we don't have the clutter of desires of what we think we want to accomplish here, is like understand. Again, part of it is really understanding yourself, right? Understanding your motivations. And then with that comes the silence. If you don't know who you are, then you're chasing after all these things that aren't you. And again, if you don't live authentically, then you're living according perhaps to what you think are the dictates of society. I have to pretend to be this way. I have to dress this way. I have to join these clubs. I have to get this education. I have to make this kind of money. I have to have this kind of trophy wife or trophy husband. You're living someone else's life. And you're generating karma according to that life that one day you're going to have to answer for. And it's like, this isn't even the debt I wanted to accrue.
Well, again, I think that's really powerful because the karmic model is such an interesting subjective thing because from a Taoist perspective, a karmic model is the creation of the individual and it is only determined by that. That's it. So all magic is predicated on the fact that you are being subject to the human condition. And so that's how that weaves itself into the rippling effects of any sort of magic that's generated from Taoism. So it's only effective if the place, person, or thing is subject to the very parameters of the human condition. So you can bypass that construct. Now, the reality is 99.999% of people within this realm are not aware of their potential until they are. And so that value of that energetic potential within a talisman, an incantation, some type of offering will present itself to the individual in all different morphed ways, because karma is, within Taoism, it's yin and yang. Karma in of itself is only a choice. And so that choice will then lead to a currency. As you put it, within the path that you are, there is a belief system. The only reason that megalomaniacs fall on their own swords, i.e. history repeats itself, we could list a bunch of psychopaths that have slain millions of people over the course of history, and the reason their dictatorships fall is they stop believing in what it is they're propagating. And then all of a sudden, you are touched by fear. You are touched by this emotional content that then creates your limitation.
Right.
But before, you were on autopilot with what would seem something that isn't remotely from any sort of human perspective. There is no such thing. You have this idea that's turned into a belief system that's driven you to create more limitation. It's when you're absent of that. And so you can accumulate currency or none at all. How is your glass, half empty or full? And I feel like a lot of people, again, you and I both agree on this, when you enter into realizing that oscillating between yin and yang, the void and the light, this is really all things. This is the evidence of all things. And then a center point of that, the vesica, the center point of between the yin and the yang, is the Wu Ji. And so then you can create from that whatever you, with your intention, it may start with a desire, and that's the fundamental.
That is how it starts, for sure. Yeah.
And then it turns into something with the intent to be realized.
And as you do that, and you see more possibilities from the void that can be brought into expression, that's the real fun part, because things you never imagined can happen now. And I think that when all of your questions have been asked and where all roads end, there God begins.
And that's where you accept and allow all things.
And now it really starts.
The now. You don't regret. A child doesn't look at the past or the future. It's just this present moment. And when you resume regular programming, which is the true nature of the now moment, which is just being, then profound things start to take place. Because, I mean, we have our own stories. I'm sorry. Are we good for time?
Yeah, it's at 12:50.
Oh, okay. We have our own stories that generate. Like, people could look at us and go, "Ah, yeah, well, this guy's a priest. He's just been walking around, dancing around the earth, enjoying just this blissful state of nothingness. It's so easy to do that. I got bills. I got problems. I got life. I've got all these things." And quite frankly, it's very true that I have created more of the same due to my understanding of my path.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, it would seem almost a hill that cannot be, climbed for many when they look at our journey. Like, someone would look at your journey and go, "Okay, you had an NDE, but you're a very accomplished individual. You've achieved more in probably one year of your life than most people do in a lifetime."
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be this sort of like absence of reality that other people are, most people are suffering. They're not living this charmed life that you guys keep going
assessment.
on and on and on about. You're talking about just be nothing, be everything. That, to me, doesn't even seem possible.
Yeah, it's such a true assessment. My wife one time said, "I don't think you know what your life looks like to other people." And I said, but you're so. Here's the thing, you can get a lot of accolades in the world. Like you can get an Emmy, you can get medals, you can have all these great experiences and opportunities and credits to your name, but it's kind of like live the story, but don't become the story, and just casually look at those and think, okay, well, that's just a milestone of how much focus and energy I put into things. But in other words, it's symbolic of my evolution. But it's not the thing in itself that you should be after, right? Like some people, might say, "Well, I'd love to have PhD following my name." By the time you work so hard to get it, it's almost a forgotten afterthought. Because you've had to get so steeped in the work, the body of work itself, and become that thing. It was a monastic existence, Many sacrifices were made just for those 3 letters. So I would say similarly, for the life I've led, which, you could say a lot of the achievements might have been a lifetime achievement for others. It's important to say that's just indicative of being really enthusiastic about working through whatever that means in terms of my evolution. And for me, it was about being eternally curious, not taking no for an answer, and just letting go. And things just happen. Knowledge just comes. The people you need to meet who are the gatekeepers. And what's interesting is, in reflection, it's amazing how many of the gatekeepers at various professional crossroads were women. Women have been some of my greatest partners in this life. And it's just been really cool. It's been an honor. And I feel so honored to have met these amazing women who are very quiet, very behind the scenes. Some working maybe for 3-letter agencies, but were like just amazing badasses. But you'd never know. How cool was that? And my mom, she was very strong too. So I really love that part of my journey here has been to properly partner with women and to support them, be their champions, and I still am. And that's been, and I think part of that probably appeals to my closet anarchist. Like I like to go and shake the tree. I like to rattle the cage. I like to, there's a Zen statement that said, "Of course hearing the truth should be disturbing." I love it.
Right.
And there's another one they say, and it's I wouldn't say this in general because it could be frowned on, rightfully so. But for NDEers, it's perfect. And it's a Zen statement that says, if you're afraid to die, then die now. For having died once, you'll never have to die again.
And people, as you refer to the NDE, makes it almost, self-explanatory.
Yeah. And exactly, and to that point, it is nice to find your tribe that you don't have to define every word you want to use in what would appear to you to be the casual conversation of what other people would say are very profound things. Because as different as many NDEs may sound, when I hear people talking about them, and there will be varied reference points, I feel like I'm hearing the same experience.
Yeah.
And from that comes that commonality of language. That's kind of an interesting dynamic I've seen pop up. Because we're realizing we're one spirit, and I do think, as different as they may sound, we are having the same experience. And that's kind of fun. It's kind of fun.
Well, that's where you get, and I keep repeating myself, that method. Because when you get that method, we talk about these things. First, we talk about energy, we talk about vibration, frequency, resonance. These are just words to people. How, and this is what I was getting to, because we're gonna finish this conversation with a profound question that you're going to answer. But before we do, how do you guide someone to be able to? This is the experience.
I'm with you.
You
I've
have
already got
to
the
experience this, because we're talking about, well, resonance. What exactly is that?
Yeah.
Frequency. What? I mean, how am I? What does that mean?
I can tell you. How many more holy books do we have to have written? How many more sermons do we have to preach? He who does not have a temple in his heart will never find his heart in any temple. My answer to that question comes from a 3-line story I could give you. One time, hundreds of years ago, let's say, in India, there was a big bandara, big gathering. It was like a bunch of gurus, and I guess they're there to just promote their wares, if you will. And this one sincere seeker walked up to this one guru and said, "There's so many gurus here. Oof. How do I find out how to choose the right one? How do I know?" And the guru said, "You can't know." He goes, "Then what do I do?" He said, "As you walk around and listen to them talking about different things, let's say you find one that you sort of seem to resonate with. Just spend time around them for a little while, and spend time around their followers, and just notice the tendency of your mind. Do you find your mind thinks about, oh, he's got nice clothes, he's got a big elephant, he's got pretty followers, or do you find that your mind doesn't so much think about these things, and maybe it thinks about higher things? If you find that you're being drawn up, maybe you should just spend more time around them, see where it takes you." That leads to my answer to your question. And while it can be great to read books because they can be very uplifting, there could be practices, like a meditative practice or a mantra or all sorts of things, right, that point in that direction. But I think really, it's certainly great if you can do it physically, but if not, try to do it mentally, psychically, spiritually. You need to be around someone who is actually doing that. And just by being in their, for example, physical space, let's make this easy. It's how your vibration affects my vibration. You use the analogy of tuning forks, and we all know if you take 2 tuning forks that are tuned to the same frequency and you bang one, the other starts to vibrate at that frequency. It's no more mystical than that. It's no more magical than that. Just go and be in their space. It's that simple. It's that simple.
Which is the beautiful part about Taoism.
Mm-hmm.
Less is more. The
Yeah.
simplicity of it.
Yeah.
To return to nothing and realize it's everything.
Exactly. Just go be in the space of the vibration you want to emulate. It's a choice. It all boils down to choice.
And it would come from someone who's listening to this, something that you like or dislike, but I would say that this is a beginning
Always.
to identify. Because you mentioned resonate, but again, that someone might go, what does that even mean? Okay.
You don't have to even understand it. Just go be with that. Identify someone you want to be more like or has something you think you want, right? That awareness. Just go hang out with them. That's it. You don't have to understand vibration awareness. You could think that's all woo-woo and tree hugging, Birkenstock wearing, vegetarian eating. Just go be in their space as much as you can be, or be in communication with them in a way. Even Zoom, right? I mean, I can read a person's text message, and sometimes just a person say, I'm going to be late, I'll be there in 30 minutes, and say, oh, that person had a near-death experience. We put our vibration into the things we do. If you type a message and send it to me, an email, your vibration is in that. We impart our vibration to everything we touch in this world, and it affects people. Simple as that. So do that.
That will be an epiphany for many people listening to this. The simplicity of that, yet it has so much depth to it, which gives you an understanding of different layers that would not have been there before you had mentioned that.
Well, it's like, a simple way to practice it too is never cook in anger. When I cook, I like to meditate. That goes into the food.
Right. Well, from a Taoist path, that would be imprinting your attention, intention. You take your attention, you put your intention in. And so, it's like just this present moment, right? For me, resonating there, it creates this palpable substance that you and I are conversating. And through that conversation, it is alive. There is the energetic potential of this space in our conversation has merged. The realization that we were never separate has been more apparent than ever before. And through that is this currency we call energy that is present, and you can identify with it. You can experience it. We go back to that tuning fork. You can experience it. And this is where you go, well, how do you do that? And I always activate or help people remember their energetic potential through the deeper architecture of that, because it's never left you. It cannot be created or destroyed. It just is. And so when that's known, when you bring your attention and then put your intention to it, oh my goodness.
There it is.
It's
And think about it. We instinctively know this already, because why do we go to concerts? Why do we go to big sporting events? Why do we go to church? We already know that by going and being with people who are, kind of vibing at that level, it's easier for us to vibe at that level too. And we come away feeling whatever it is, more fulfilled or energized, or, music is about emotion and memories and meaningful moments in our lives. So we're practicing for finding spiritual people to go hang out with and connect to and vibrate at that frequency with. So we're already practicing it. Again, it's just changing channels. Do the same thing.
The perfect answer. Perfection, my brother.
We're already doing it.
Now, the final question. What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Love and letting go. True love does let go. True love does not judge. Doesn't try to define even. It just sees things as they are and accepts things as they are. To me, that's what it is. That awareness.
My teachers always remind me, all obstacles are dissolved and removed from your path. Anything you want, need, or desire, anything that is you'll never want from money, food, or shelter, as you're in service to help and heal others at the highest level, accept and love all as is. And that just through that experience, you experience an experience. Through those words, your body is telling you, holy moly, that is the truth.
It's saying, it really does work. All this stuff I thought was, it really does work. And I've seen it. I'm comfortable in life because again, it's like I said before, nothing was put here for your enjoyment. It was put here for your correct use. And if you use things correctly, it's in that you will find joy. You will find enough. You will be taken care of. Buckminster Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome, one time said, if you're doing the right thing, universe will support you, and usually just in the nick of time. That's its calling card. Otherwise, you would think it's random.
What a coincidence. Well, this has been beautiful, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
I'm just so grateful to have you in my life. I'm so grateful to just return to our bond and our friendship and in this lifetime and reignite that very now moment. And we have the rest of our natural born lives to enjoy that.
It will be a joy to reconvene.
It will
Thank you.
be. I want to thank you, Jim, from the bottom of my heart. I love you very much.
Thank you, son. Love you. Thanks.
And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you on the next one, guys.